The Tale of Mr. Silly Crotom. Chapter 1. An Old Friend. In a quiet village on the outskirts of Pyongyang, there was a small but renowned tire shop run by an elderly man named Mr. Silly Crotoms. His shop was cluttered with stacks of old and new tires, the smell of rubber filling the air, and the sound of his loud, booming voice echoing down the narrow alleyway. Mr. Silly Crotoms had a reputation for being the loudest man in the entire village. Everyone knew when he was around because you could hear him screaming from a mile away. "Come get your tires, you lousy sacks of potatoes." Mr. Silly Crotoms would shout at the top of his lungs, waving his arms wildly. "These are the best tires you'll ever find. I'll leather your face inside if you don't believe me." Then he'd burst into laughter, a deep, guttural laugh that rattled the windows of nearby houses. People were confused and a little terrified by Mr. Silly Crotoms. They didn't know if he was serious or if it was all some strange joke. But they couldn't deny that he had the best tires in town. Despite his outrageous behavior, customers kept coming back, drawn by the quality of his goods and the sheer entertainment of being in his presence. One day, a man named Mr. Park entered the shop, nervously eyeing the stacks of tires and the looming figure of Mr. Silly Crotoms. "Oh, I need a new tire for my bike," he said hesitantly. Mr. Silly Crotom's eyes lit up with glee. "A new tire, eh? Well, you've come to the right place, you slippery little eel. I've got just the thing for you." He grabbed a tire from the pile and slammed it down on the counter with a thud. "This one here will make your bike faster than a cheater on hot coals. And if you don't like it, I'll leather your face inside and out." He burst into his usual, unsettling laughter, leaving Mr. Park stunned and unsure of what to say. "Oh, thanks. I think," Mr. Park mumbled, hastily handing over the money and grabbing the tire. He backed out of the shop as quickly as possible, still hearing Mr. Silly Crotom's laughter echoing in his ears. Even though the villagers were often bewildered by Mr. Silly Crotoms and his threats of leathering faces, they couldn't help but appreciate his passion for tires and his unforgettable, if not terrifying, presence. And so, the shop continued to thrive, with Mr. Silly Crotom's loud voice and strange laughter filling the village, reminding everyone that sometimes, the most unlikely places can become the most memorable. The days passed, and Mr. Silly Crotom's tire shop became even more of a local legend. People started coming not just to buy tires but to see what crazy thing he would say or do next. His screaming became a ritual in the village, and everyone knew that if you needed a tire, you had to be ready for Mr. Silly Crotom's shouting and his threat to leather your face inside. One afternoon, a group of tourists from the city arrived at the village. They had heard rumors about the loud tire seller and decided to see for themselves. The leader of the group, a young man named Jin Soo, walked boldly into the shop, his friends following behind with their phones ready to record. "Hey, old man," Jin Soo called out, trying to sound tough. "Got anything for a real car? Or do you just sell tires for bicycles?" Mr. Silly Crotoms turned around slowly, his eyes narrowing as he looked Jin Soo up and down. "You think you're funny, eh? Think you can waltz in here and mock my tires?" He grabbed a massive tire off the wall and slammed it on the floor with a thunderous bang. "This here is a tire for a beast, not for some wet-nosed punk like you. I'll leather your face inside if you don't believe me." Jin Soo's friends giggled nervously, but Jin Soo wasn't backing down. "Is that so? Let's see it then, old man. Show us what you got." Mr. Silly Crotom's face split into a wide, crazy grin. "Oh, you'll see, boy. You'll see." He lifted the tire with ease and, in a bizarre display of strength, started tossing it like it weighed nothing. "This tire will make your car fly, and if it doesn't, I'll leather your face inside and make you walk on your hands." The group burst out laughing, half amused and half frightened by the old man's weird antics. Jin Soo, trying to keep his cool, nodded approvingly. "All right, old man, I'll take it. Let's see if it's as good as you say." Just as Mr. Silly Crotoms was about to hand over the tire, something unexpected happened. A loud rumble shook the ground, and everyone in the shop froze. Suddenly, a car came speeding down the alley, swerving wildly before coming to a screeching halt right in front of the shop. A man jumped out, panicked and sweating. "Mr. Silly Crotoms. Help! My tire blew out, and I'm stuck. You've got to fix it." Mr. Silly Crotoms turned to the group of tourists, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Watch and learn, you snot-nosed brats. This is how a real man handles a tire." With lightning speed, he grabbed a tire and rushed to the car. In minutes, he had the damaged tire off and the new one on, his hands moving with expert precision. When he was done, he slapped the hood of the car and shouted, "Now get out of here before I leather your face inside." The man in the car, clearly terrified but grateful, nodded furiously and sped off, leaving the tourists stunned and silent. Jin Soo finally spoke, his voice shaky with both respect and fear. Okay, old man. I guess you're the real deal. I'll take that tire. Mr. Silly Crotoms, now calm again, handed over the tire and smirked. You better believe it, kid. And if you don't, well, you know what I'll do. As the group left the shop, they realized that under all the craziness, Mr. Silly Crotoms wasn't just a screaming old man. He was a master of his craft, and his bark was probably worse than his bite, probably. But one thing was certain, they would never forget their encounter with the loud, tyre-slinging legend of the village. Sorry, I had caps lock on. As the group of tourists left Mr. Silly Crotom's shop, they couldn't stop talking about what just happened. Jinsu, still holding the tire, was trying to make sense of it all. Man, that guy is nuts. But, he's kinda awesome too, he said, scratching his head. Meanwhile, back in the shop, Mr. Silly Crotoms was pacing around, muttering to himself. Leather their faces inside, heh, I really gotta stop saying that, he chuckled, though his laughter was a bit softer this time, almost as if even he was a bit confused by his own antics. But then, the door creaked open again. This time, it was Mrs. Lee, the village's gossip queen. She waddled in, eyes wide, looking at the tires like they were the most fascinating things she had ever seen. Mr. Crotoms, I heard you were screaming up a storm again. What is it with you and those tires, huh? Why can't you just sell them nice and quiet like other folks? Mr. Silly Crotoms looked at her, a sly grin spreading across his face. Mrs. Lee, if I sold them quiet, no one would know I'm the best in the whole dang village. He walked up to her, his voice dropping to a low, almost conspiratorial whisper. Besides, I got a secret, you know. Mrs. Lee leaned in, her curiosity piqued. A secret? What kinder secret, she asked, eyes narrowing. Mr. Silly Crotoms looked around, as if making sure no one else was listening, then he leaned in closer. These tires, they are not just regular tires. They are made with magic rubber, he said, barely holding back his laughter. Mrs. Lee's jaw dropped. Magic rubber? You're pulling my leg, old man. But Mr. Silly Crotoms just nodded seriously. Nope, not joking. You see, when you put these tires on, they make your car go faster, smoother, and even quieter. And, sometimes, they even make your car invisible. He threw his hands in the air, eyes wide, as if expecting some grand reaction. Mrs. Lee blinked, processing what he said. Then, she burst out laughing. Oh, Mr. Crotoms, you and your stories. You should be selling fairy tales, not tires. She waved him off and started to leave, still chuckling to herself. But as she walked out, Mr. Silly Crotom's face turned serious again. Don't say I didn't warn ya, Mrs. Lee. These tires got powers you wouldn't believe, he shouted after her, though this time, there was a strange look in his eyes. Something almost secretive. Later that evening, after the shop had closed, Mr. Silly Crotoms sat alone in the dark, the shop unusually quiet. He looked at the tires stacked around him and sighed. Magic rubber, huh, he muttered, shaking his head. Maybe I'm the one who's going crazy, or maybe. Just then, there was a faint glow from the back of the shop, where their special tires were stored. Mr. Silly Crotom's eyes widened, and he slowly stood up, moving towards the light. As he reached out to touch one of the glowing tires, it suddenly vanished, poof, right before his eyes. He stumbled back, his mouth open in shock. Well, maybe I wasn't joking, after all, he whispered, a strange mix of fear and excitement creeping into his voice. From that night on, Mr. Silly Crotoms started to question just how much of his own nonsense was really nonsense. And as word spread through the village about the glowing, disappearing tires, people began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to the loud, eccentric old man than they had ever realized. As the village buzzed with tales of the mysterious glowing tires, Mr. Silly Crotoms was deep in thought. His shop had become a place of fascination, with people visiting just to see what strange thing he might do next. But Mr. Silly Crotoms had a new plan in mind, one that was far more ambitious than anyone could imagine. In the dim light of his cluttered workshop, Mr. Silly Crotoms carefully laid out his tools and materials. Around him were stacks of tires, some old and worn, others brand new and shiny. He looked at the tires with a gleam in his eye, muttering to himself, if these tires can do magic, maybe they can help me with my greatest invention yet. He began by stacking and arranging the tires, using ropes and metal wires to secure them in place. He crafted a head out of a large, round tire, attaching smaller tires for limbs and another one for the torso. With a final touch, he used a pair of old headlights for eyes and a small, round tire for a nose. As he worked, he sang to himself in a high-pitched voice, clearly enjoying the process. After hours of hard work, Mr. Silly Crotoms stepped back and admired his creation. The figure stood upright, looking a bit wobbly but surprisingly lifelike. A real boy out of tires. Just like in the fairy tales, he said with a triumphant grin. He put his hands on his hips and gave the tire figure a pat. Now all I need is a little magic to bring you to life. He rummaged through a dusty box and pulled out a small, ancient-looking book titled Mystical Incantations and Taya Sorcery. With a flourish, he opened the book and began chanting a strange, rhythmic incantation. The words were garbled and odd, mixing bits of Korean and nonsense sounds. As he chanted, a soft glow began to emanate from the Taya figure. Mr. Silly Croutons watched in awe as the figure's tires seemed to shimmer and pulse with a strange energy. "Come to life, little Taya boy," he shouted, his voice echoing through the shop. But instead of a boy, the tires began to twitch and shake, and the whole structure wobbled precariously. Mr. Silly Croutons held his breath, hoping against hope that his creation would come to life. Then, with a loud pop and a puff of smoke, the tires collapsed into a heap, leaving a few scattered parts and a faint smell of burning rubber. Mr. Silly Croutons blinked, stunned. "Oh, well, that wasn't supposed to happen," he mumbled, scratching his head. He tried to hide his disappointment but couldn't help chuckling at the sight of his creation in ruins. "Maybe I need a bit more practice with this magic stuff." Determined not to be discouraged, Mr. Silly Croutons started picking up the tires and reassembling them. "Next time, I'll get it right," he promised, adjusting his glasses and mumbling more incantations under his breath. "I'll make a real boy out of tires yet." The next morning, the villagers gathered around the shop, curious about the latest spectacle. When they saw the mangled remains of the tire boy and Mr. Silly Croutons frantically working on a new version, they couldn't help but laugh. Some came to offer advice, while others just enjoyed the show. As for Mr. Silly Croutons, he took it all in stride. With a mischievous grin and a wave of his hand, he called out to the crowd, "Don't worry, folks. I'm just working on a new prototype. This tire boy thing's gonna be a real hit someday." And so, the legend of Mr. Silly Croutons grew even larger. His attempts to create a real boy from tires became a beloved story in the village, a tale of magic, ambition, and tireless creativity. Despite his repeated failures, Mr. Silly Croutons never lost his spirit, and his shop remained a place of wonder and whimsy, where dreams and tires intertwined in the most unexpected ways. The next morning, after a few hours of sleep and a hearty breakfast of kimchi and rice, Mr. Silly Croutons was back in his shop, brimming with determination. The previous day's failure with the tire boy hadn't discouraged him. If anything, it had fueled his resolve to make something even better. He decided to try again, this time with a new idea, a tire girl. Mr. Silly Croutons gathered an assortment of tires and set to work. He arranged them carefully, creating a more streamlined figure with a new sense of elegance. Their head was slightly smaller, with a pair of shiny hubcaps for eyes and a delicate, curved tire for a mouth. He used smaller, more refined tires for the arms and legs, and added a skirt made from several tires stacked in a tiered fashion. With the same mix of excitement and nerves, he began chanting the incantation from his dusty book, his voice rising in an enthusiastic crescendo. The tires began to glow faintly, and for a moment, it looked like the figure was going to come to life. But then, just as before, things went awry. The figure shuddered, and instead of gracefully coming to life, it started to wobble uncontrollably. Their head tilted at an odd angle, the arms flailed wildly, and the skirt of tires collapsed in a disorganized heap. Their whole structure seemed to have a mind of its own, shaking and spinning in chaotic movements. Mr. Silly Croutons' face flushed with frustration. "Come on, you stupid pile of tires," he yelled, his voice rising in pitch. "Why won't you work?" In a fit of rage, he grabbed a metal rod and began smashing the tires. "I've had it with you," he screamed, pounding the figure until it was nothing more than a jumbled mess of rubber and metal. He kicked the remains, his face red with anger. "Why can't I get it right?" The commotion didn't go unnoticed. The loud crashes and Mr. Silly Croutons' increasingly frantic shouts attracted the attention of the local police. Within minutes, a patrol car arrived outside the shop, and officers stepped out, looking around with concern. One of the officers, Officer Kim, approached the door cautiously. "Mr. Croutons, is everything all right in there?" he called out. Inside, Mr. Silly Croutons was still fuming, his breathing heavy and ragged. He looked up, startled to see the officers. "No, it's not all right," he roared, his voice echoing in the confined space. "These tires won't come to life, and now they're all ruined." Officer Kim stepped inside, taking in the scene of destruction. "Mr. Croutons, we've had complaints about loud noises and smashing sounds coming from your shop. Is there a problem we can help with?" Mr. Silly Croutons took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "It's nothing, officer. I was just experimenting with some new tire magic, and it didn't go as planned." The other officer, Officer Choi, looked at the mangled tires and then at Mr. Silly Croutons. "Magic, huh? Sounds like you've been having a rough time with it. Maybe you should take a break and cool down." Mr. Silly Croutons nodded, rubbing his temples. Yes, yes. I suppose I got a bit carried away. I'll clean this up and take a break. The officers exchanged a glance and, seeing that Mr. Silly Croutons seemed to be calming down, decided to leave him to his cleanup. All right, Mr. Croutons, Officer Kim said, turning to leave. Just try to keep the noise down and remember, if you need any assistance, don't hesitate to call. As the officers left, Mr. Silly Crouton sighed deeply, looking at the mess around him. I'll get this right, he muttered to himself. One way or another. Despite the frustration, Mr. Silly Croutons began to clean up the wreckage of his latest creation. His dreams of making a real, living figure from tires had yet to come to fruition, but his determination remained unshaken. The village would talk about the day the police were called to Mr. Silly Crouton's shop, and though it was a day of chaos, it was also a day that highlighted the eccentric charm and relentless spirit of the old tire merchant. For Oh Minnie. What happened next? ChatGPT. After the police left, Mr. Silly Croutons took a deep breath and started cleaning up the mess of tires. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of frustration that had built up. Despite his best efforts and loud proclamations, his creations just weren't turning out as he had hoped. By evening, the shop was back in order, though the wreckage of the tire girl still lay in a corner, a stark reminder of his failed attempt. Mr. Silly Croutons decided he needed a fresh perspective. Perhaps a change of approach would help him achieve his goal. The next morning, he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He had an idea. Instead of trying to magically animate the tires, he would focus on making them as lifelike as possible through craftsmanship alone. Maybe if he improved the design and construction, he could create something that would impress everyone, even if it didn't come to life. He spent the entire day in his workshop, meticulously working on a new design. This time, he decided to build a full-size tire figure, combining various materials to enhance the appearance. He used paints, fabrics, and even some old spare parts to give the figure a more realistic look. He created a new girl figure, but with more attention to detail than before, realistic eyes made from glass jars, a mouth crafted from leather, and a dress fashioned from colorful scraps of fabric. As he worked, he was interrupted by a knock on the shop door. It was a young girl from the village, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. Mr. Croutons, I heard you were having a tough time with your tire figures. I brought you these flowers to cheer you up, she said shyly. Mr. Silly Croutons looked up, touched by the gesture. Why, thank you, young lady. That's very kind of you. She smiled and looked around the shop. What are you working on now? It looks different from before. He explained his new approach and showed her the figure he was working on. The girl's eyes widened in awe. Wow, it looks amazing. I bet people will love it. Encouraged by her reaction, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a new surge of energy. I hope so. I'm trying my best to make it something special. With a renewed sense of optimism, he continued his work with even greater determination. The days passed, and his tire figure began to take shape. The new design was far more refined and impressive. Word of Mr. Silly Crouton's progress spread through the village, and soon people began to visit his shop to see the latest creation. Finally, the day came when Mr. Silly Croutons was ready to unveil his new figure. He arranged a small exhibition in front of his shop, inviting the villagers to come and see. The crowd gathered, eager to see what the eccentric old man had been up to. As the cover was removed, revealing the new tire figure, the crowd gasped in amazement. The figure was remarkably lifelike, with detailed features and a striking appearance. It didn't come to life, but it was an impressive work of art that demonstrated Mr. Silly Crouton's skill and creativity. The villagers applauded and cheered, showing their appreciation for the effort and talent Mr. Silly Croutons had put into his work. He stood proudly, a broad smile on his face, as he took in their admiration. I guess I didn't need magic after all, Mr. Silly Crouton said with a chuckle. Sometimes, a bit of hard work and creativity can go a long way. The tire figure became a local attraction, and Mr. Silly Crouton's reputation as a talented craftsman grew. Though he never did manage to create a living tire figure, his determination and creativity earned him the respect and admiration of the village. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to work on his tire creations, always pushing the boundaries of his craft. The shop became a place of wonder and inspiration, where people came not only to buy tires but to marvel at the incredible creations of the village's most eccentric artist. With the unveiling of his tire figure, Mr. Silly Croutons had finally earned the villagers' respect and admiration. The shop became a popular spot, with people coming from near and far to see his amazing tire creations. The once chaotic and noisy shop was now filled with the buzz of curiosity and appreciation. One afternoon, as Mr. Silly Croutons was putting the finishing touches on a new tire sculpture, a stranger walked into the shop. The man was tall, with a neat suit and an air of authority. He introduced himself as Mr. Han, a collector of unusual art. "Hello, Mr. Croutons," Mr. Han said, eyeing the shop's many creations. "I've heard about your impressive work and wanted to see it for myself. I must say, I'm quite intrigued." Mr. Silly Croutons wiped his hands on a rag and smiled, trying to look as professional as possible. "Well, thank you, Mr. Han. I've been working hard on these creations. What brings you here?" Mr. Han walked around the shop, examining the figures with a keen eye. "I'm always on the lookout for unique and unconventional art. Your tire sculptures are quite remarkable. Have you ever considered showcasing them in a larger venue?" Mr. Silly Crouton's eyes lit up. "You mean like an exhibition? That would be wonderful. I've always dreamed of showing my work to a bigger audience." Mr. Han nodded. "Yes, precisely. I can help arrange a showcase in the city. There are many art collectors and enthusiasts who would be very interested in your work." Excited and a bit nervous, Mr. Silly Croutons agreed to the offer. Over the next few weeks, he prepared for the exhibition with even more enthusiasm. He created new sculptures, polished up his best pieces, and made sure everything was perfect. Finally, the day of the exhibition arrived. Mr. Silly Croutons loaded up his best tire creations and traveled to the city with Mr. Han. The exhibition hall was large and impressive, filled with various artworks from across the region. Mr. Silly Croutons set up his section with care, arranging his sculptures and figures to catch the eye of the visitors. The exhibition opened, and people began to wander through the hall, admiring the diverse array of art. When they reached Mr. Silly Croutons' display, many were fascinated by the unique and creative use of tires. The large tire girl sculpture, now looking even more refined, drew particular attention. Mr. Silly Croutons watched as people gathered around, marveling at his work. He felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. For once, his hard work and determination had paid off. But then, something unexpected happened. A group of wealthy collectors, known for their sharp critiques, began to make disparaging comments. They whispered among themselves, pointing out minor flaws and questioning the artistic merit of the tire figures. Mr. Silly Croutons overheard their remarks and felt a pang of frustration. His earlier excitement began to wane. He tried to brush it off, but the negative comments took their toll. As the day went on, he became more disheartened. By the end of the day, Mr. Silly Croutons was exhausted and disappointed. He packed up his remaining sculptures, feeling defeated. "Maybe they were right," he muttered to himself. "Maybe my creations aren't as good as I thought." As he was leaving, Mr. Han approached him. "Don't let those comments get to you, Mr. Croutons. Art is subjective, and many people enjoyed your work. You've done something truly unique, and that's worth celebrating." Mr. Silly Croutons sighed but managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Mr. Han. I guess I just need to keep working and improving." Back in his shop, Mr. Silly Croutons took a few days to reflect. He realized that every artist faced criticism and that it was part of the journey. He decided to use the experience as motivation rather than letting it bring him down. He continued to create new tire sculptures, incorporating the feedback he had received. His work evolved and improved, and over time, he became known not just for his eccentricity but for his growing skill and creativity. The shop remained a place of wonder, and Mr. Silly Croutons continued to push the boundaries of his craft. Though the exhibition had been a challenge, it ultimately made him a better artist. And as the village and city alike came to appreciate his unique creations, Mr. Silly Croutons found joy and fulfillment in his art, knowing that he had made his mark in a way that was entirely his own. For Oh Mini. What happened next? ChatGPT. After the exhibition, Mr. Silly Croutons returned to his village, his spirits lifted despite the mixed reception in the city. He threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, determined to refine his craft and make even more impressive tire sculptures. The positive feedback he had received from many visitors at the exhibition was a beacon of encouragement. One day, as Mr. Silly Croutons was busy in his workshop, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was the young girl from the village who had previously brought him flowers. She had come back, looking a bit anxious but also excited. "Mr. Croutons," she said, "I heard that there's a big festival coming up in the village, and they are looking for unique exhibits to display. I thought maybe your tire sculptures could be part of it." Mr. Silly Croutons' eyes sparkled with interest. "A festival, you say? That sounds like a perfect opportunity to show off my work. Tell me more." The girl explained that the village was hosting a cultural festival to celebrate local art and traditions. They were seeking various types of exhibits, and her mother had suggested that Mr. Silly Croutons' sculptures would be a great addition. With excitement, Mr. Silly Croutons agreed to participate. He spent the next few weeks preparing for the festival, creating new sculptures and enhancing some of his older pieces. He crafted a series of whimsical Taya animals, including a playful Taya lion, a graceful Taya swan, and a cheeky Taya monkey. He even made a large, colorful Taya archway to welcome visitors to his exhibit. On the day of the festival, Mr. Silly Croutons arrived early to set up his display. The village square was bustling with activity, with various booths, food stalls, and performances. The air was filled with the sounds of music and laughter as people from the surrounding areas came to enjoy the festivities. As the festival officially opened, Mr. Silly Croutons' Taya exhibit drew a steady stream of visitors. Children laughed and played around the Taya animals, and adults admired the creativity and craftsmanship. The large Taya archway became a popular photo spot, with people lining up to take pictures under it. Among the visitors was Mr. Han, who had heard about the festival and decided to drop by. He was impressed by how well Mr. Silly Croutons' work was received by the local community. "This is fantastic, Mr. Croutons," Mr. Han said, clapping him on the back. "You've really captured the spirit of the village. Your art is shining here." Feeling proud and validated, Mr. Silly Croutons mingled with the visitors, sharing stories behind each of his creations. The festival was a huge success for him, and it felt like a joyous homecoming after the challenges he had faced. As the festival drew to a close, the village mayor approached Mr. Silly Croutons with a beaming smile. "Mr. Croutons, your Taya sculptures were a big hit. We'd like to award you a special plaque for your contribution to the festival." Mr. Silly Croutons accepted the plaque with gratitude, his heart swelling with pride. "Thank you so much. It means a lot to me." The festival ended with a spectacular fireworks display, and Mr. Silly Croutons joined in the celebration, enjoying the festive atmosphere with the villagers. The success of the festival reinforced his belief in his art and his place in the community. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to create and innovate, using his experience from the festival as inspiration. He started working on a new series of sculptures, each one more imaginative than the last. His shop became a popular spot not only for buying tires but for experiencing the joy and creativity of his unique art. The village embraced Mr. Silly Croutons as a cherished artist, and his reputation continued to grow. His creations became a symbol of the village's vibrant spirit and creativity, reminding everyone that sometimes, the most unexpected materials could create something truly magical. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons lived out his days happily, finding joy in his art and in the laughter and admiration of those who came to see his remarkable Taya sculptures. For Mini. Okay, the next part will be the last. I want the story to wrap up and H retires on a beach. ChatGPT. As the years passed, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to delight the village with his ever-evolving Taya sculptures. His shop became a beloved landmark, and his art was celebrated both locally and beyond. But as time wore on, Mr. Silly Croutons began to feel the weight of age and the desire for a change of scenery. One autumn afternoon, after a particularly successful exhibition at the village fair, Mr. Silly Croutons sat in his workshop, reflecting on his journey. The shop was filled with his creations, but a sense of calm and contentment settled over him. He realized that he had achieved more than he had ever dreamed of, and the time had come to enjoy a well-deserved rest. He decided to retire and spend his remaining years in peace. After much consideration, he chose a picturesque beachside town as his new home. The idea of watching the waves roll in, feeling the warm sand between his toes, and enjoying the tranquil beauty of the ocean was incredibly appealing. He spent the next few weeks preparing for his departure, packing up his tools and carefully wrapping his prized sculptures. He made arrangements to donate some of his pieces to local museums and schools, ensuring that his art would continue to inspire others. On his final day in the village, Mr. Silly Croutons was given a heartfelt send-off by the community. The villagers gathered to celebrate his retirement, sharing stories and offering well wishes. The young girl who had first brought him flowers years ago was now a young woman, and she presented him with a beautiful scrapbook filled with messages and photographs from his fans. "Mr. Croutons," she said, tears in her eyes, "you've brought so much joy and wonder to our village. We'll miss you, but we're happy that you're going to find new adventures." Mr. Silly Croutons, touched by the gesture, hugged her and the rest of the villagers. "Thank you all for everything. I'll always treasure our time together. But now, it's time for me to relax and enjoy the beach." With a final wave, he loaded his belongings into a small truck and set off for his new home. The journey to the beachside town was filled with anticipation and excitement. As he arrived, he was greeted by the sound of waves crashing and the sight of a charming, sunlit beach. He settled into a cozy seaside cottage, just a short walk from the shore. The beach was a perfect backdrop for his retirement. Each morning, he took long walks along the shoreline, breathing in the salty air and marveling at the beauty of the ocean. In the afternoons, he enjoyed reading on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Occasionally, he would sit on the sand, building small sculptures out of seashells and driftwood, a nostalgic nod to his tire art. The simple joy of creating something with his hands, even if it was just for fun, continued to bring him satisfaction. One day, as he watched the sun dip below the horizon, Mr. Silly Croutons reflected on his life. He had come a long way from his noisy shop in the village, but he was content. He had fulfilled his dream of being an artist, brought joy to many, and now he was enjoying the tranquility he had always yearned for. With a smile on his face and a sense of peace in his heart, Mr. Silly Croutons knew that he had lived a life full of adventure, creativity, and happiness. The beachside town became his sanctuary, and he spent his days savoring the simple pleasures of retirement. As the waves continued to roll in and the seagulls called overhead, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found his paradise, and in the quiet moments by the sea, he was content with the knowledge that his legacy would live on through his art and the memories he had created. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons lived out his days on the beach, a happy and fulfilled artist, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the peaceful rhythm of the ocean. As Mr. Silly Croutons settled into his new beachside life, he was enjoying the relaxation and tranquility that he had always dreamed of. However, his innate curiosity and creativity were not easily tamed. The peaceful beachside town seemed to stir something within him, sparking new ideas and inspirations. One sunny morning, while walking along the shore, Mr. Silly Croutons stumbled upon a large, intricate piece of driftwood that had washed ashore. The wood was gnarled and weathered, but it had a unique, almost sculptural quality to it. An idea began to take shape in his mind. Back at his cottage, Mr. Silly Croutons set up a small workshop in his garage, filled with his old tools and some new supplies he had brought along. He began working with the driftwood, experimenting with different designs and techniques. His creative spirit was as vibrant as ever, and soon, he was crafting intricate driftwood sculptures and sea-themed art. The locals, curious about the newcomer's activities, began to visit Mr. Silly Croutons' workshop. They were fascinated by his driftwood creations and the way he transformed ordinary pieces of wood into stunning art. Word spread about the talented artist who had come to their town, and soon, visitors from neighboring towns began arriving to see his work. One day, a local newspaper reporter, Ms. Park, came to interview Mr. Silly Croutons. She was intrigued by his artistic journey and his unique driftwood sculptures. During the interview, she asked him about his inspiration and what had led him to start creating again. Mr. Silly Croutons smiled and replied, "After years of working with tires, I needed a new challenge. The beach and the ocean have given me a fresh perspective. Driftwood is so organic and full of character. Each piece tells its own story, and I'm just helping to reveal it." Ms. Park's article was a hit, and soon, Mr. Silly Croutons' driftwood sculptures were gaining recognition far beyond the small beachside town. Art collectors, tourists, and enthusiasts came to see his new creations and buy his pieces. The once quiet town became a bustling hub of art and creativity, partly thanks to Mr. Silly Croutons' work. With his new success, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to host an annual art festival celebrating driftwood and seaside art. He invited artists from across the region to display their work, turning the festival into a major event that drew large crowds. The festival not only showcased art but also included workshops, live music, and food stalls, making it a vibrant community event. The festival became a beloved tradition, and Mr. Silly Croutons found joy in organizing it each year. He enjoyed collaborating with other artists, sharing his techniques, and watching the creativity of the community flourish. Despite his success, Mr. Silly Croutons never lost his down-to-earth charm. He often gave free art workshops to local children and encouraged them to explore their own creativity. His workshops were filled with laughter and enthusiasm, and he was always delighted to see young artists finding their own artistic voices. Years passed, and Mr. Silly Croutons continued to live a fulfilling life by the sea. His driftwood sculptures became iconic, and he earned a reputation not only as a talented artist but as a generous mentor and community leader. The beachside town flourished, and his art played a significant role in its cultural renaissance. One quiet evening, as Mr. Silly Croutons watched the sunset over the ocean, he reflected on his journey. From his humble beginnings in the village to his tireless creativity with tires and now his celebrated driftwood art, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had found a new way to express himself, contributed to the cultural life of his new home, and remained a source of inspiration and joy to those around him. The beach had become more than just a retirement destination. It was a place where his creativity continued to thrive and where he had made lasting contributions to the art world and the community. As he walked along the shore, the gentle waves lapping at his feet, Mr. Silly Croutons knew that he had truly found his paradise. His life was a testament to the idea that creativity knows no bounds and that it's never too late to reinvent oneself and find joy in new adventures. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons lived out his days in contentment, always creating, always inspiring, and always cherishing the beauty of the beach and the art that had become his lifelong passion. As Mr. Silly Croutons continued to thrive in his beachside paradise, life brought new and unexpected twists. His art had become a staple of the community, and the annual festival was a highlight of the town's calendar. However, with success came new challenges and opportunities that would take him on a new journey. One day, while Mr. Silly Croutons was working on a particularly intricate driftwood sculpture, a mysterious visitor arrived at his cottage. The man was impeccably dressed, with a sleek briefcase and a serious demeanor. He introduced himself as Mr. Yarn, a representative from an international art gallery in a major city. "Mr. Croutons, I've heard about your exceptional driftwood sculptures and the impact they've had on your community," Mr. Yarn said. "We'd like to invite you to showcase your work at our gallery. It's an opportunity to present your art on a global stage." Mr. Silly Croutons was taken aback. The thought of exhibiting his work in a prestigious gallery was thrilling, but it also seemed daunting. "That sounds incredible, but I've never shown my work outside of this town. I'm not sure if I'm ready for such a big stage." Mr. Yarn reassured him. "You've already achieved so much, and your work has captivated many. This is just another step in your journey. We believe your art deserves a wider audience." After much contemplation, Mr. Silly Croutons agreed to the invitation. He spent the following months preparing for the exhibition, creating a series of new sculptures and carefully selecting pieces that showcased the essence of his driftwood art. The preparations were intense, but he was excited about the opportunity to share his creations with a larger audience. When the day of the exhibition arrived, Mr. Silly Croutons traveled to the city with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The gallery was vast and elegant, filled with artworks from renowned artists around the world. He set up his display, and as the opening night approached, he was filled with a sense of anticipation. The exhibition was a resounding success. Art critics, collectors, and enthusiasts flocked to Mr. Silly Croutons' section, marveling at the intricacy and originality of his driftwood sculptures. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, and many visitors expressed their admiration for his unique approach to art. One particular critic, Ms. Lee, wrote a glowing review in a major art magazine. "Mr. Silly Croutons' driftwood sculptures are a testament to the beauty of nature and the artist's remarkable skill. His ability to transform simple materials into profound pieces of art is nothing short of magical." The exhibition not only boosted Mr. Silly Croutons' reputation but also brought new opportunities. He was approached by several galleries interested in featuring his work and received invitations to collaborate with other artists. The exposure opened doors he had never imagined. Despite the newfound fame, Mr. Silly Croutons remained grounded and true to his roots. He continued to return to his beachside town, where he remained a beloved figure. He used his success to support local art programs and mentor young artists, encouraging them to explore their creativity. The annual art festival grew even larger, attracting visitors from around the world. Mr. Silly Croutons' contributions made the festival a celebrated event in the art community, and his work became a symbol of the town's vibrant culture. As the years went by, Mr. Silly Croutons eventually decided to scale back on his travels and focus on his beachside retreat. He found joy in the simpler aspects of life, spending his days creating art, enjoying the beauty of nature, and cherishing the company of friends and family. In his later years, Mr. Silly Croutons often sat by the shore, reflecting on his extraordinary journey. From the bustling village shop to the serene beachside cottage, he had experienced a lifetime of creativity, adventure, and success. His legacy was not only in his art but in the positive impact he had made on others and the community. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the ocean, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a profound sense of contentment. His life had been a tapestry of creativity, challenges, and triumphs. He had found fulfillment in every chapter of his journey, and he looked forward to each new day with gratitude and joy. In the peaceful rhythm of the waves and the beauty of his beachside home, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to live out his days, creating, inspiring, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. His story was a testament to the power of passion, perseverance, and the endless possibilities of creativity. Mr. Silly Croutons continued to savor his beachside life, but the tides of change were never far off. His art had brought him recognition and fulfillment, yet the artist in him remained restless, always seeking new inspirations and challenges. The next chapter of his life unfolded with a series of unexpected events that would once again transform his world. One day, as Mr. Silly Croutons was strolling along the beach collecting driftwood for his next project, he discovered a weathered, old bottle partially buried in the sand. Inside was a rolled-up piece of parchment. Curious, he retrieved the parchment and carefully unrolled it. The parchment was an old map, marked with strange symbols and a faded path leading to an X on a distant part of the island. There were also cryptic notes in an unfamiliar script. Intrigued, Mr. Silly Croutons wondered if it was part of a long-forgotten treasure hunt or some kind of adventure. He showed the map to a few locals, who were equally intrigued but had no idea of its origins. The map seemed to stir something deep within Mr. Silly Croutons, and he decided to embark on a quest to uncover its secrets. With a renewed sense of adventure, Mr. Silly Croutons set out to follow the map. He enlisted the help of a local historian named Mr. Kim, who had an extensive knowledge of the island's history and legends. Together, they studied the map and planned their journey. The map led them through dense forests, along rocky cliffs, and into hidden caves. Along the way, they encountered various obstacles and solved riddles that seemed to bring them closer to the treasure. Mr. Silly Croutons found himself exhilarated by the physical challenge and the intellectual stimulation of their hunt. As they approached the location marked by their X, they discovered an old, abandoned lighthouse. Inside, they found a hidden chamber containing a chest covered in dust and cobwebs. With bated breath, they opened the chest, revealing a collection of antique coins, jewelry, and historical artifacts. The treasure was a remarkable find, but it was not the gold or jewels that captivated Mr. Silly Croutons, it was the history and the stories behind the artifacts. Many of the items were from different eras and cultures, offering a glimpse into the past. Mr. Silly Croutons decided to share his discovery with the community. He worked with local historians and museum curators to catalogue and display the artifacts. The lighthouse was restored and became a museum dedicated to the island's history and the story of the treasure. The museum quickly became a popular attraction, bringing more visitors to the beachside town. Mr. Silly Croutons' contribution to the preservation of local history added another layer to his legacy, enriching the cultural fabric of the community. Inspired by the treasure hunt and the historical artifacts, Mr. Silly Croutons began a new project. He created a series of sculptures that combined elements of driftwood with the artifacts he had found. Each sculpture told a story or represented a piece of history, blending art with the rich heritage of the island. The new series was met with acclaim and further solidified Mr. Silly Croutons' reputation as an artist and storyteller. His sculptures became highly sought after, and he used the proceeds to support local education and cultural programs. As Mr. Silly Croutons grew older, he continued to work on his art and support the community. He became a beloved figure not just for his artistic talents but for his dedication to preserving and celebrating the island's history and culture. He often reflected on his life, from his early days of working with tires to his driftwood sculptures and the adventure of the treasure hunt. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a lasting impact in many ways. One tranquil evening, as he watched the sun set over the ocean, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a profound sense of peace. He had lived a life full of creativity, adventure, and purpose. His journey had taken him from a noisy village shop to a serene beachside retreat, and he had embraced every opportunity along the way. With his legacy firmly established, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to enjoy the simple pleasures of life by the sea, knowing that his story would inspire others to follow their passions and embrace the endless possibilities of creativity and discovery. As Mr. Silly Croutons entered his late 70s, he had grown accustomed to a life of peaceful relaxation and continued creativity by the sea. He had become an integral part of the beachside community, but he still enjoyed the little things that brought him joy and satisfaction. One such joy was his well-maintained garden. The lush greenery surrounding his seaside cottage had always been a point of pride. However, maintaining the garden was becoming a bit of a challenge. Mr. Silly Croutons decided it was time to invest in a lawnmower to keep his garden in pristine condition. The lawnmower he chose was a sleek, modern model with all the bells and whistles. It had a powerful engine, a comfortable seat, and even a cup holder. Mr. Silly Croutons quickly found himself enjoying the process of mowing his lawn. The rhythmic hum of the mower and the satisfaction of a neatly trimmed garden became a cherished part of his daily routine. To keep up with the demands of his creative projects and the physical activity of gardening, Mr. Silly Croutons developed a new habit, drinking Monster Zero Ultra, a popular sugar-free energy drink. He was drawn to its crisp, refreshing taste and the boost it provided. Every morning, after a hearty breakfast, Mr. Silly Croutons would crack open a can of Monster Zero Ultra, enjoying its effervescent flavor while he worked on his sculptures or mowed the lawn. It became his energizing ritual, giving him the stamina he needed to stay active and engaged in his artistic endeavors. One sunny morning, Mr. Silly Croutons awoke early, ready to tackle his day. At 78 years old, he was still spry and full of energy. He started his day with a brisk walk along the beach, savoring the fresh sea breeze and the beauty of the ocean. Back at his cottage, he enjoyed a breakfast of fresh fruit and whole grain toast. Afterward, he grabbed a can of Monster Zero Ultra and headed to his garden. He spent a few hours mowing the lawn, reveling in the satisfaction of a well-manicured yard. With his garden looking pristine, Mr. Silly Croutons moved to his workshop to work on his latest driftwood sculpture. The energy drink helped him stay focused and energized as he carefully crafted the new piece. The sculpture was inspired by the intricate patterns of the waves and the textures of the beach, combining his love for the ocean with his artistic skills. In the afternoon, he took a break to relax on his porch, sipping on another can of Monster Zero Ultra. He chatted with neighbors who stopped by to admire his garden and catch up on local news. His friendly demeanor and vibrant personality made him a beloved figure in the community. As the sun began to set, Mr. Silly Croutons enjoyed a leisurely dinner and then took a stroll along the beach, reflecting on his day. The rhythmic sound of the waves and the cool evening air provided a soothing end to his busy day. At 78, Mr. Silly Croutons was living a life filled with creativity, routine, and contentment. His daily habits, from mowing the lawn to enjoying Monster Zero Ultra, contributed to his well-being and happiness. He remained active and engaged, continuing to make art and enjoy the simple pleasures of life by the sea. As he watched the sunset from his porch, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life he had built. From his early days of tire sculptures to his current driftwood art and lawn mowing routine, each chapter of his life had been filled with joy, creativity, and discovery. With the gentle waves lapping at the shore and the stars beginning to twinkle in the sky, Mr. Silly Croutons knew that he had found his place in the world. He embraced each day with enthusiasm and a sense of wonder, knowing that every moment was a part of his ongoing adventure. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to live his days with vigor, creativity, and a touch of energy drink-fueled zest, making the most of every opportunity and cherishing the life he had so richly created. For Minnie, he should go shopping. Write a story about him buying cans of beans at the supermarket and he gets confused at the self-checkout. ChatGPT. Certainly. Let's see how Mr. Silly Croutons handles a trip to the supermarket and a self-checkout experience. On a crisp, sunny morning, Mr. Silly Croutons decided it was time to restock his pantry. His garden was in top shape, and he had a new driftwood sculpture nearly finished, so he set off for the local supermarket to pick up some essentials. Among the items on his list were cans of beans, which he enjoyed for their simplicity and versatility. Mr. Silly Croutons strolled into the supermarket, enjoying their hum of activity and their vibrant displays of fresh produce. He grabbed a shopping cart and made his way down the aisles, selecting a few vegetables and fruits before heading to the canned goods section. There, he carefully examined the shelves lined with various brands of beans, black beans, kidney beans, baked beans, and more. Mr. Silly Croutons had always been particular about his beans, and he chose several cans of his favorite brand. His cart began to fill up with a colorful array of beans, each can neatly stacked. After he had gathered enough beans to last him a while, he made his way to the checkout area. To his surprise, he noticed a new feature in the store: self-checkout stations. The machines were sleek and modern, and he was intrigued by the idea of checking out his items himself. Mr. Silly Croutons approached the self-checkout with a sense of curiosity. He placed his cans of beans on the conveyor belt and looked at the screen, which was blinking with a friendly welcome message. "Scan your items," it prompted. He picked up a can of beans and placed it under the scanner, but nothing happened. Perplexed, he tried again, holding the can in different angles, but the machine remained stubbornly silent. He glanced around, hoping someone might assist him, but the area was bustling with other shoppers engrossed in their own transactions. Feeling a bit flustered, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to scan the can more vigorously, waving it around as if trying to entice the machine into recognizing it. The beeping sound of the scanner occasionally made a faint noise, but no item was registering. After several minutes of fruitless attempts, he noticed a red light flashing on the screen and an error message appearing. "Please rescan item." Confused, Mr. Silly Croutons muttered to himself, "Why isn't this working? I'm sure I'm doing it right." At that moment, a friendly store employee named Lisa noticed Mr. Silly Croutons' struggle. She approached with a smile and asked, "Hi there. Can I help you with the self-checkout?" Mr. Silly Croutons sighed with relief. "Oh, thank goodness. I've been trying to scan these cans of beans for ages, but the machine doesn't seem to like them." Lisa took a look at the self-checkout station and quickly identified the issue. "It looks like the scanner is having trouble with the labels. Let me help you out." With Lisa's guidance, Mr. Silly Croutons learned how to properly place the cans on the scanner and how to navigate the touchscreen interface. She demonstrated how to scan each item and explained how to use the payment options. As they worked together, Mr. Silly Croutons chuckled, "I guess I'm more used to making art than using these high-tech gadgets." Lisa laughed. "Don't worry, it takes a bit of practice. You're doing great now." Once Mr. Silly Croutons was comfortable with the self-checkout process, he completed his transaction with ease. Lisa helped him finalize the payment and bagged his items. "Thank you so much for your help," Mr. Silly Croutons said gratefully. "I might need a few more lessons before I mastered this self-checkout thing." Lisa smiled warmly. "Anytime. If you ever need more assistance, just ask. With his bags of beans and groceries in tow, Mr. Silly Croutons left the supermarket, feeling both accomplished and amused by his little adventure. He chuckled to himself as he made his way back to his cottage, reflecting on how even simple tasks could turn into unexpected challenges. Back at home, he unpacked his groceries and placed the cans of beans in the pantry. As he sipped on a can of Monster Zero Ultra and admired his neatly organized pantry, he felt a sense of satisfaction. The day had been a reminder that no matter how old you get or how much you've accomplished, there's always room for learning and new experiences. And with that thought, Mr. Silly Crouton settled into his evening routine, content and ready to face whatever new adventures awaited him. After Mr. Silly Crouton's humorous adventure at the supermarket, his days continued with a blend of familiar routines and new experiences. However, life had a few more surprises in store for him. One afternoon, while Mr. Silly Croutons was working on a particularly intricate driftwood sculpture, a delivery van pulled up to his cottage. The driver handed him a large envelope addressed to him. The envelope was embossed with a gold seal, and Mr. Silly Croutons couldn't help but be intrigued. Inside the envelope was an invitation to participate in an international art exhibition held in a renowned city far from his beachside town. The exhibition aimed to showcase artists who had made significant contributions to their local communities and had a unique artistic vision. Mr. Silly Croutons was excited but also a bit apprehensive. The thought of traveling and presenting his work on an international stage was thrilling, but it also meant stepping out of his comfort zone. With a mix of excitement and nervousness, Mr. Silly Croutons began preparing for the exhibition. He carefully selected a collection of his most impressive driftwood sculptures and packed them with great care. The process involved meticulous planning, from arranging for transportation to ensuring that each piece was securely wrapped. As he prepared for his journey, Mr. Silly Croutons also had to say goodbye to his beloved beachside town for a little while. The community gathered to wish him well, and the local art gallery organized a small farewell event in his honor. The event was filled with warm wishes, heartfelt speeches, and even a few humorous stories about his previous adventures. Upon arriving in the city, Mr. Silly Croutons was struck by the hustle and bustle of the urban environment. The art exhibition was held in a grand gallery with high ceilings and elegant decor. His driftwood sculptures were displayed alongside works from other celebrated artists, each bringing a unique flair to the exhibition. The opening night of the exhibition was a grand affair, with art critics, collectors, and enthusiasts from around the world in attendance. Mr. Silly Croutons found himself surrounded by a diverse group of people who were genuinely interested in his work. During the event, he was interviewed by several art journalists and featured in local media. The feedback on his sculptures was overwhelmingly positive, and many people were fascinated by his innovative use of driftwood and his ability to capture the essence of nature in his art. While at the exhibition, Mr. Silly Croutons had a chance encounter with a renowned artist named Elena, who was known for her intricate mixed-media installations. She was deeply impressed by his driftwood sculptures and invited him to collaborate on a new project that combined their artistic styles. The idea of collaborating with another artist was exciting, and Mr. Silly Croutons agreed to the collaboration. The project involved creating a large-scale installation that would be displayed in a prominent public space, merging Elena's mixed-media techniques with his driftwood art. After several weeks in the city and participating in the exhibition, Mr. Silly Croutons returned to his beachside home. The collaboration with Elena had been a remarkable experience, and the project was a huge success. It had opened up new creative avenues for him and allowed him to explore new techniques. Back at home, he resumed his routine of working on new driftwood sculptures and maintaining his garden. He also continued to enjoy his Monster Zero Ultra and the occasional shopping trip, but now with a touch more experience and confidence. The international exposure had not only enhanced Mr. Silly Croutons' reputation but had also brought fresh inspiration. He began experimenting with new ideas, incorporating elements from his collaboration with Elena into his own work. His art continued to evolve, blending his beachside roots with new influences. The annual art festival in his town grew even more prominent, drawing artists and visitors from around the world. Mr. Silly Croutons was pleased to see his town thriving and becoming a hub for artistic expression. As he sat by the beach, reflecting on his recent adventures, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His journey had taken him from his humble beginnings to the global stage, and through it all, he had remained true to his artistic vision and passion. With each new experience, he embraced the ever-changing tapestry of life with enthusiasm and curiosity, knowing that there were always more adventures and discoveries on the horizon. As Mr. Silly Croutons settled back into his beachside life, his recent international success had ignited a new spark in him. He was filled with fresh inspiration and an eagerness to continue exploring both his art and the world around him. Here's what happened next. A few months after returning home, Mr. Silly Croutons received a surprise invitation. It was from a prominent art institute in Europe, requesting his participation in a prestigious artist residency program. The program aimed to support artists in exploring new techniques and engaging with international art communities. The opportunity was both exciting and daunting. The idea of traveling to Europe and spending time in a new artistic environment was tempting, but it would require leaving behind his beloved beachside retreat once again. After careful consideration and discussions with friends and family, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to accept the invitation. He saw it as a chance to further develop his artistic skills and gain new perspectives that could enrich his work. Upon arriving in Europe, Mr. Silly Croutons was greeted by the picturesque landscape and rich cultural heritage of the region. The artist residency was located in a charming countryside villa with lush gardens and inspiring surroundings. During the residency, Mr. Silly Croutons had access to state-of-the-art facilities and met a diverse group of artists from around the world. The program included workshops, collaborative projects, and opportunities for public exhibitions. One of the highlights of the residency was a collaborative project where Mr. Silly Croutons worked with artists specializing in ceramics and metalwork. Together, they created a large-scale installation that combined driftwood with intricate ceramic patterns and metal sculptures. The project was showcased in a local gallery, receiving acclaim for its innovative fusion of materials and techniques. As the residency came to an end, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a deep sense of gratitude and accomplishment. He had learned new techniques, made lasting connections, and gained valuable insights into the global art scene. However, he was also eager to return to his beachside home and continue his work in his familiar environment. Upon returning, he found his cottage just as he had left it, with the serene beach and his well-loved garden waiting for him. The experience had rejuvenated his creative spirit, and he was excited to apply his new ideas and techniques to his driftwood art. Back in his beachside town, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to work on his sculptures with renewed vigor. He incorporated elements from his European experience into his art, creating pieces that reflected a blend of his beachside inspirations and the global influences he had encountered. He also began to offer workshops and art classes to the local community, sharing his new knowledge and techniques with aspiring artists. The workshops were well received, and many participants were inspired by Mr. Silly Croutons' journey and his willingness to embrace new experiences. The annual art festival continued to flourish, and Mr. Silly Croutons played a key role in its success. His contributions helped elevate the festival to new heights, attracting even more visitors and artists from around the world. As Mr. Silly Croutons grew older, he continued to find joy and fulfillment in his art and community. His driftwood sculptures became iconic symbols of the town's artistic spirit, and he remained an influential figure in both local and international art circles. He often reflected on his remarkable journey, from his early days of working with tires to his international adventures and his continued work by the sea. Each chapter of his life had been filled with growth, discovery, and a deep passion for creativity. One peaceful evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a profound sense of contentment. His life had been a tapestry of rich experiences, and he had embraced every opportunity with enthusiasm and curiosity. In his heart, Mr. Silly Croutons knew that his story was far from over. With every new day, he continued to explore, create, and inspire, knowing that life's adventures were ever unfolding and filled with endless possibilities. After the excitement of the treasure hunt and the success of the art festival, Mr. Silly Croutons settled into a period of relative calm. However, life still had a few surprises in store for him, each leading to new and enriching experiences. One day, as Mr. Silly Croutons was working on a new driftwood sculpture in his workshop, he received an unexpected visitor. A young woman named Mia, a documentary filmmaker, arrived at his cottage. She had heard about Mr. Silly Croutons' fascinating journey from a local friend and wanted to make a film about his life and artistic achievements. Mia was enthusiastic and full of ideas. She proposed creating a documentary that would showcase Mr. Silly Croutons' art, his adventures, and the impact he had on the community. Initially hesitant about being in the spotlight, Mr. Silly Croutons agreed after Mia explained that the documentary would not only highlight his art but also the spirit of the island and its people. The filming process was both challenging and rewarding. Mia followed Mr. Silly Croutons through his daily routines, capturing his creative process, his interactions with the community, and the beautiful landscapes of the island. The documentary also included interviews with local residents and fellow artists, adding depth and context to Mr. Silly Croutons' story. During this time, Mr. Silly Croutons found himself reflecting on his journey more deeply. He shared stories about his early days working with tires, his international adventures, and the community projects that had brought him so much joy. His reflections provided a rich narrative for the documentary and helped him appreciate the many facets of his life and work. After months of filming and editing, Mia organized a premiere event for the documentary. The event was held at the local theater and was open to the community, friends, and visitors. The premiere was a grand occasion, with a red carpet, a full house, and an air of excitement. As the lights dimmed and the documentary began, Mr. Silly Croutons watched with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The film beautifully captured his artistic journey, the vibrant spirit of the island, and the connections he had forged with others. It was an emotional and inspiring tribute to his life and work. The audience was moved by the documentary, and the film received widespread praise. It was featured in several film festivals and won awards for its storytelling and cinematography. The documentary also drew attention from art enthusiasts and critics around the world, further elevating Mr. Silly Croutons' reputation. The success of the documentary opened new doors for Mr. Silly Croutons. He was invited to give talks and workshops at various art institutions and festivals, sharing his experiences and insights with a broader audience. He continued to work on his driftwood sculptures, incorporating new ideas and techniques inspired by his recent experiences. In addition to his artistic endeavors, Mr. Silly Croutons became involved in a new community project aimed at supporting young artists. He helped establish an art scholarship fund and mentoring program, providing guidance and opportunities for emerging talent in the island community. The scholarship program became a cornerstone of the local art scene, nurturing the next generation of artists and fostering creativity within the community. Mr. Silly Croutons took great pride in seeing young artists develop their skills and make their mark. As Mr. Silly Croutons continued to live by the sea, he often reflected on his remarkable journey. From his early days of working with tires to his global adventures and the impact he had made in his community, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His beachside cottage remained a haven of creativity and tranquility. He continued to enjoy his daily routines, including gardening, working on his sculptures, and sipping Monster Zero Ultra. The sense of peace and contentment that he had found in his art and community was ever present. With each passing year, Mr. Silly Croutons embraced life with the same enthusiasm and curiosity that had defined his journey. His legacy was one of creativity, community, and a passion for exploring new horizons. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons' story continued, filled with new projects, meaningful connections, and a lasting impact on the world around him. He lived each day with joy and wonder, knowing that his adventures were far from over and that life's possibilities were boundless. As Mr. Silly Croutons entered his late 80s, he began to experience a decline in his health. It started with minor ailments but gradually led to a more significant health issue that left him bedridden. Despite his usual resilience and positive attitude, he found himself unable to continue his daily activities and creative projects. Mr. Silly Croutons faced his new reality with the same determination he had shown throughout his life. His home, once a bustling hub of artistic activity, now became a place of rest and recovery. His friends, family, and the community rallied around him, offering support and care during this challenging time. Lisa, his longtime friend from the local store, was particularly attentive. She visited him regularly, bringing meals, chatting with him about the latest community news, and ensuring he was comfortable. Mia, the documentary filmmaker, also kept in touch and updated him on the positive impact his story had made. Even though Mr. Silly Croutons was confined to his bed, his influence on the community continued. The art scholarship fund he had helped establish flourished, and he took great pride in hearing about the success of the young artists it supported. Lisa and other friends kept him informed about the progress of the projects he had started, ensuring he remained connected to the vibrant artistic life he had helped nurture. Local art groups and residents organized a special exhibition in Mr. Silly Croutons' honor, featuring his work and the work of the young artists he had mentored. The event celebrated his contributions and raised funds to support his ongoing care. The community's support was a testament to the impact he had made on those around him. During his time bedridden, Mr. Silly Croutons found solace in reminiscing about his adventures and achievements. Friends and family would bring him photo albums, video recordings of the documentary, and letters from people whose lives he had touched. These mementos provided comfort and reminded him of the rich tapestry of experiences he had woven throughout his life. Occasionally, he would receive visits from the young artists he had mentored. They brought him sketches, updates on their projects, and heartfelt gratitude for the guidance he had provided. These visits were a source of joy and inspiration for Mr. Silly Croutons, reaffirming the positive impact he had made. As his health continued to decline, Mr. Silly Croutons prepared for the final chapter of his life with the same grace and acceptance he had shown throughout his journey. He spent his remaining days surrounded by loved ones, finding peace in their presence and the knowledge that his legacy would endure. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, casting a warm golden light across his room, Mr. Silly Croutons reflected on his life. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that his artistic contributions, community impact, and personal relationships had enriched not only his own life but also the lives of others. In his final moments, he was comforted by the presence of his closest friends and family. His passing was gentle and serene, marked by the love and respect of those who had been touched by his life. After Mr. Silly Croton's passing, his legacy lived on in the community he had cherished. The Arts Scholarship Fund continued to support emerging artists, and the annual art festival dedicated a special section to his work and influence. His driftwood sculptures remained a beloved feature of the town, serving as a reminder of his creativity and passion. A memorial was established in his honor, celebrating his contributions to art and the community. The local museum curated an exhibition featuring his sculptures, personal artifacts, and highlights from his journey. Visitors came from near and far to pay their respects and learn about the remarkable life of Mr. Silly Croutons. The community continued to celebrate his life and achievements, ensuring that his spirit of creativity and exploration remained a vibrant part of their collective memory. Through his art, his mentorship, and the love he had shared with those around him, Mr. Silly Croutons' impact endured, inspiring future generations to embrace their passions and make a positive difference in the world. The day of Mr. Silly Croutons' funeral had arrived, a solemn occasion marked by the quiet reverence of the community paying their respects. The local church was filled with friends, family, and townspeople who had gathered to honor the life and legacy of the beloved artist. The service was held with great respect, featuring heartfelt eulogies, a slideshow of Mr. Silly Croutons' life achievements, and displays of his driftwood sculptures. The atmosphere was one of quiet reflection, with many attendees quietly wiping away tears and reminiscing about the profound impact he had made. As the service concluded, the coffin was slowly carried to the cemetery. The mood was somber, and the community was prepared for a final goodbye. However, what happened next would turn the day's somber tone on its head. As the coffin was lowered into the grave, a strange noise emanated from within. Those closest to the coffin exchanged puzzled glances. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the lid of the coffin began to creak open. Suddenly, Mr. Silly Croutons himself emerged, sitting up with a mischievous grin on his face. "Just kidding," he announced with a chuckle. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps of shock and horror filled the air as the attendees tried to process what was happening. Some stared in disbelief, others screamed in shock, and a few fainted, overwhelmed by the surreal turn of events. Mr. Silly Croutons, noticing the chaos he had created, attempted to explain. "I'm so sorry, everyone. I didn't mean to cause such a stir. I thought it would be a funny way to say goodbye, but I see now that it was a bit too much." The crowd remained in stunned silence. Some were angry, feeling that the act was in poor taste, while others were simply too shocked to react. Lisa, his loyal friend, approached the coffin with a mix of anger and concern. "Mr. Silly Croutons, this is absolutely unacceptable. You've scared everyone half to death." MIA, who had been filming the documentary, was in disbelief. This was supposed to be a respectful farewell. What on earth were you thinking? Realizing the gravity of his actions, Mr. Silly Croutons apologized profusely. "I genuinely thought it would be a humorous way to end things, but I see now that I misjudged it. Please forgive me." In the days that followed, the community struggled to come to terms with the bizarre event. While some were deeply offended, others gradually began to see the humor in Mr. Silly Croutons' unconventional farewell. He made efforts to make amends by personally apologizing to those affected and hosting a series of informal gatherings to ease the tension and restore goodwill. Mr. Silly Croutons' genuine remorse and heartfelt apologies helped to heal the rift, though the incident remained a memorable and controversial moment in the town's history. Despite the unsettling nature of his final stunt, Mr. Silly Croutons' legacy as an artist and community figure remained intact. The Arts Scholarship Fund continued to thrive, and the annual art festival continued to celebrate his contributions. His driftwood sculptures and community projects remained cherished parts of the town's identity. Mr. Silly Croutons' final act was remembered as a striking reminder of his playful and unpredictable nature. It became a story that was recounted with a mix of incredulity and amusement, adding an unexpected chapter to the life of the man who had always embraced creativity and adventure. In the end, Mr. Silly Croutons' legacy endured, not just through his art but also through the unique and unforgettable way he chose to say his final goodbye. The community eventually accepted the odd turn of events as part of his larger-than-life personality and continued to honor his memory with a blend of respect and amused affection. After the astonishing and unsettling event of Mr. Silly Croutons' return, the town found itself grappling with the surreal and controversial episode. Here's how the aftermath unfolded. In the weeks following the shocking funeral incident, the community began to heal from the emotional upheaval. Mr. Silly Croutons made a sincere effort to mend relationships and rebuild trust. He arranged personal meetings with many of the people who had been most affected by his stunt, offering heartfelt apologies and explanations for his actions. He also organized a series of community gatherings and art workshops as a way to contribute positively and re-establish his connection with the townspeople. These events allowed him to show that his intentions were never meant to hurt but rather to create a memorable, if ill-advised, farewell. The local art festival, which had been a major part of Mr. Silly Crotom's life and legacy, was approaching. The festival organizers, initially hesitant, decided to proceed with the event as a way to demonstrate the town's resilience and commitment to celebrating art. Mr. Silly Croutons was invited to participate, but his involvement was under close scrutiny. The festival was a great success, featuring a tribute to Mr. Silly Croutons' work alongside pieces from young artists who had benefited from his scholarship fund. His contributions to the festival were met with a mixture of applause and cautious optimism. Many attendees acknowledged his significant impact on the community while still feeling wary of the recent controversy. MIA, the documentary filmmaker, decided to include the shocking funeral incident as part of the film's final cut. She framed it as a dramatic twist in the narrative of Mr. Silly Croutons' life, emphasizing both the unexpected nature of the event and the broader context of his artistic journey. The documentary's new version garnered significant media attention, turning the funeral incident into a dramatic, albeit controversial, climax. The film's portrayal of Mr. Silly Croutons' life, including this unusual event, sparked conversations and debates about art, public perception, and the nature of legacy. Having faced the repercussions of his final stunt, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to channel his energies into new, positive directions. He began working on a new series of artworks inspired by the themes of transformation and redemption. These pieces reflected his reflections on the events of the past year and his desire to move forward with integrity and creativity. He also launched a series of community art projects aimed at fostering collaboration and dialogue among local artists. These projects were well received and helped to rebuild his standing within the community. His efforts to contribute positively were seen as a way to demonstrate his commitment to his art and his community, despite the recent controversies. As time went on, the initial shock of the funeral incident faded into the background, and Mr. Silly Croutons' contributions to the art world and his community were remembered more prominently. The town came to view the incident as a curious and dramatic chapter in a long and impactful life. Mr. Silly Croutons continued to live by the beach, engaging in his art and community projects with renewed vigor. His driftwood sculptures remained a beloved feature of the town, and his involvement in local arts and culture continued to inspire others. In his later years, Mr. Silly Croutons reflected on his life with a sense of gratitude and acceptance. The strange twist of his final farewell became a part of his larger-than-life story, a reminder of his unique personality and his unwavering commitment to pushing boundaries. The community, too, moved forward, embracing the lessons learned from the unusual events. The story of Mr. Silly Croutons' final act became a part of local folklore, a reminder of the complexities of human nature and the enduring power of art to provoke, inspire, and challenge. Mr. Silly Croutons' life and legacy continued to be celebrated, with his contributions to art, his mentorship, and his unique personality leaving an indelible mark on the town and its people. The remarkable, if unconventional, end to his journey served as a testament to a life lived fully and vividly, always with a touch of unpredictability and humor. After the whirlwind of recent events, Mr. Silly Croutons found himself enjoying a rare moment of tranquility. His beachside home was once again a sanctuary of peace, and his art projects were progressing smoothly. However, one lazy afternoon, a new adventure began with a simple yet grand culinary experience. One particularly hot day, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a strong craving for a delicious sandwich. He decided to order through Uber Eats, hoping to enjoy a convenient meal without the hassle of cooking. Scrolling through the app, he spotted a local deli offering a special, an extravagant sandwich with layers of meats, cheeses, and vegetables, all stacked high in a generous portion. Feeling adventurous and a bit indulgent, Mr. Silly Croutons placed his order for their Mega Deli Delight, a sandwich known for its colossal size and over-the-top ingredients. The delivery arrived promptly, and Mr. Silly Croutons was thrilled to see the sandwich in its oversized glory. It was an impressive sight, stuffed with layers of turkey, ham, roast beef, cheeses, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, and a mountain of condiments, all wedged between two enormous slices of bread. He carefully unpacked the sandwich, marveling at its size. "This looks like a feast for an army," he exclaimed, laughing at the thought of such a colossal meal. Knowing he couldn't possibly finish such a giant sandwich in one sitting, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to store it in the fridge. He carefully wrapped it in foil and placed it on a large plate, ensuring it would be fresh for the days to come. The fridge, already filled with other culinary delights and artistic supplies, now housed the massive sandwich like a trophy of indulgence. Over the following days, Mr. Silly Croutons made the sandwich his daily delight. Each meal, he would carefully unwrap a portion of the sandwich, savoring a bite or two at a time. It became a ritual, each piece of the sandwich was a reminder of his adventurous choice. The sandwich became a source of amusement and satisfaction. He enjoyed the playful challenge of trying to make it last, turning each meal into a moment of reflection and enjoyment. As days turned into weeks, the sandwich became a local curiosity. Friends and neighbors would stop by, intrigued by Mr. Silly Croton's tales of his epic sandwich experience. His stories about the massive meal sparked laughter and fascination, and soon, it became a fun topic of conversation around town. Lisa and Mia, who had been keeping in touch, were particularly amused by the saga. They would often visit, bringing smaller dishes to share alongside Mr. Silly Croton's sandwich portions. It became a communal event, enjoying the sandwich in small bites while catching up and reminiscing about old times. Eventually, after several weeks, the last piece of the mega deli delight was consumed. Mr. Silly Croton savored the final bite with a sense of accomplishment and nostalgia. The epic sandwich had been more than just a meal, it had been a symbol of his adventurous spirit and ability to find joy in the simplest things. With the last crumb gone, Mr. Silly Croutons cleaned up the remnants of his grand culinary adventure. The empty plate and foil were a testament to his perseverance and enjoyment of the unexpected. As Mr. Silly Croutons continued with his art and community projects, he often reminisced about the sandwich saga with a smile. It had been a light-hearted chapter in his life, reminding him of the importance of embracing the little pleasures and finding joy in the everyday. His friends and neighbors continued to share laughs about the epic sandwich, and it became a cherished anecdote in the community's collective memory. The story of the giant sandwich was told with affection and amusement, adding a unique and humorous layer to Mr. Silly Croutons' colorful legacy. In the end, the sandwich served as a reminder that sometimes, the most extraordinary adventures can come from the simplest, most unexpected sources. And so, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to live his life with the same playful spirit and zest for the small joys, savoring each moment with a smile and a sense of wonder. After the saga of the mega sandwich came to an end, Mr. Silly Croutons found himself yearning for a new experience, something that would bring a fresh twist to his life. His days were filled with art and community events, but he felt a sudden urge for a new kind of adventure. That's when he stumbled upon an opportunity that he couldn't resist: a horse. One sunny afternoon, as Mr. Silly Croutons was browsing through a local classifieds website, he came across an ad for a horse for sale. The horse was described as a gentle, well-trained steed named Thunder, and the ad included a few pictures of Thunder looking majestic in a lush field. Feeling a sudden spark of excitement, Mr. Silly Croutons couldn't help but imagine himself riding through the picturesque countryside on such a noble creature. He thought it might be a delightful new adventure, so he decided to take a closer look. The following weekend, Mr. Silly Croutons visited the seller's farm to meet Thunder. The horse was even more impressive in person, tall, strong, and with a calm, friendly demeanor. After spending some time with Thunder and getting to know him, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to make the purchase. With the paperwork completed and Thunder's belongings packed up, Mr. Silly Croutons loaded the horse into a trailer and transported him to his beachside home. Thunder quickly settled into his new environment. Mr. Silly Croutons set up a cozy stable and a paddock for Thunder to roam. The horse enjoyed the spacious area and the scenic views of the ocean, becoming a delightful addition to Mr. Silly Croutons' beachside property. The adjustment to horse ownership was a learning curve. Mr. Silly Croutons took riding lessons to learn how to properly care for and ride Thunder. The process was both challenging and rewarding, filled with moments of joy and frustration. Thunder, with his patient and gentle nature, helped make the experience enjoyable. With time and practice, Mr. Silly Croutons and Thunder became a well-matched pair. They started taking daily rides along the beach and through the nearby countryside. Thunder's strong, steady gait was perfect for exploring the scenic trails and enjoying the beautiful landscapes. The new routine brought a fresh sense of adventure and fulfillment. Thunder became a beloved companion, and their rides became a source of relaxation and joy for Mr. Silly Croutons. Friends and neighbors were fascinated by the sight of Mr. Silly Croutons riding Thunder along the beach, and the two of them quickly became local celebrities. The arrival of Thunder also had an impact on the local community. Mr. Silly Croutons organized a series of equestrian events, including horse rides for children, community trail rides, and a small horse show. These events brought people together and allowed them to enjoy the beauty of the countryside and the joy of horseback riding. The events were a hit, and Thunder became a central figure in these community gatherings. The horse's gentle demeanor and Mr. Silly Croutons' enthusiasm made the events enjoyable and memorable for everyone involved. As the months passed, Thunder continued to be a beloved part of Mr. Silly Croutons' life. Their daily rides became a cherished routine, and the community events helped foster a sense of camaraderie and enjoyment among the townspeople. Thunder's presence in Mr. Silly Croutons' life was a reminder of the unexpected joys that new experiences can bring. The horse added a new dimension to Mr. Silly Croutons' adventures, blending seamlessly with his artistic pursuits and community efforts. The story of Mr. Silly Croutons and Thunder became a new chapter in his colorful life, celebrated with affection and humor by those who knew him. Thunder was more than just a horse, he was a symbol of Mr. Silly Croutons' boundless curiosity and his ability to find wonder in every corner of life. And so, As the sun set over the ocean, casting a golden glow across the beach, Mr. Silly Croutons and Thunder enjoyed their evening ride, content in the knowledge that life's adventures could come in many forms, each one adding to the rich tapestry of their extraordinary journey. After a few months of riding Thunder and enjoying his new routine, Mr. Silly Croutons started to feel a bit restless. The excitement of horse ownership had begun to wane, and he was looking for a new adventure to spark his interest. One day, while flipping through an agricultural magazine, he came across an ad for goats. The idea of having a goat for milk intrigued him, and he decided to dive into this new venture. On a crisp morning, Mr. Silly Croutons visited a local farm known for its dairy goats. He was introduced to several goats, and he quickly took a liking to a friendly, milk-producing goat named Beller. Beller was described as a reliable milk producer with a sweet temperament, making her a perfect addition to Mr. Silly Croutons' home. After finalizing the purchase, Beller was transported to Mr. Silly Croutons' property, where a new pen and shelter had been set up for her. Mr. Silly Croutons was excited about his new acquisition and eagerly anticipated the fresh goat milk that would soon be part of his daily routine. Beller quickly settled into her new home. Mr. Silly Croutons found joy in caring for her, feeding her, and learning the basics of goat milking. He embraced the new routine with enthusiasm, even setting up a special area in his kitchen for milking. The first few days went smoothly, and Mr. Silly Croutons enjoyed the novelty of fresh goat milk. He found it to be a unique and rewarding experience, appreciating the effort it took to care for and milk Beller. News of Mr. Silly Croutons' new goat quickly spread through their community. The initial reactions were mixed, with many people expressing skepticism and distaste. Goat milk, particularly when freshly obtained, was seen as unusual by some. When Mr. Silly Croutons began sharing samples of his goat milk with neighbors and friends, their reactions ranged from polite reluctance to outright aversion. Some found the taste and smell of goat milk unpleasant, and the idea of milking a goat was considered unconventional and unappealing by many. Despite the mixed reactions, Mr. Silly Croutons remained unfazed. He continued to serve goat milk at social gatherings and even included it in his baking and cooking, finding creative ways to incorporate it into his meals. The more people reacted negatively, the more Mr. Silly Croutons found the situation amusing. He laughed heartily at the dismay and discomfort expressed by his friends and neighbors. His good-natured humor about the situation helped diffuse any tension and made the entire experience a source of light-hearted amusement. One day, at a neighborhood barbecue, Mr. Silly Croutons proudly announced, "I've got fresh goat milk for everyone. It's a taste of something truly unique." As people hesitated or grimaced at the thought of trying it, he couldn't help but chuckle. His laughter was infectious, and while some people still avoided the goat milk, many appreciated Mr. Silly Croutons' ability to find humor in the situation. His playful attitude and refusal to take offense turned the goat milk adventure into a running joke among friends and neighbors. Over time, Beller became a beloved, if unconventional, member of the community. Her presence brought a touch of whimsy and curiosity, and the story of Mr. Silly Croutons and his goat became a charming anecdote in local lore. Despite the initial distaste for goat milk, Beller was cared for with great affection. Mr. Silly Croutons continued to enjoy his new routine, and the goat milk became a quirky part of his daily life. As the months passed, the story of Mr. Silly Croutons' goat adventure remained a highlight of local conversation. The tale of the extravagant sandwich, the grand horse, and the eccentric goat became intertwined in the fabric of his colorful life story. Mr. Silly Croutons' ability to embrace and laugh at life's oddities was a defining feature of his personality. The goat, though met with mixed reactions, was a testament to his adventurous spirit and his knack for finding joy in every experience. In the end, Beller's time with Mr. Silly Croutons became a beloved chapter in his ongoing adventure, reminding everyone that sometimes, the most unexpected and unconventional experiences can bring the most memorable moments and laughter. With Beller the goat settled comfortably into her new life and the community having accepted her quirky presence, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to explore the joys and challenges of goat ownership. The next chapter in his adventurous life took an unexpected turn when he decided to integrate Beller into his artistic pursuits. Inspired by Beller's antics and unique personality, Mr. Silly Croutons embarked on a new artistic project, creating a series of sculptures and paintings featuring goats. He was particularly fascinated by the playful and unpredictable nature of goats, and he wanted to capture these traits in his art. He began by crafting whimsical driftwood sculptures of goats, each piece reflecting different aspects of Beller's character, her curiosity, her mischievousness, and her gentle demeanor. These sculptures were crafted with the same imaginative flair that defined his earlier work, with driftwood twisted and shaped into playful goat figures. In addition to the sculptures, Mr. Silly Croutons started a series of paintings. These works featured vibrant, surreal depictions of goats in fantastical settings, riding bicycles, playing musical instruments, and exploring dreamlike landscapes. His art captured the fun and eccentricity of his new muse, and the paintings quickly became a hit among his friends and local art enthusiasts. As the collection of goat-themed art grew, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to organize an art exhibition dedicated to his new creations. The event, held at the local gallery, was titled The Whimsical World of Goats and showcased his driftwood sculptures and paintings. The exhibition was a playful and imaginative affair, with each piece telling a story about Bella and the whimsical world she inspired. The gallery was decorated with goat-themed decorations, and there was a special section where Bella herself was featured in a cozy corner with hay and treats, providing a real-life touch to the art. The community's reaction was a blend of admiration and amusement. Many people were surprised by the creativity and charm of the goat-themed art. The exhibition drew a good crowd, and Bella's presence added an extra layer of charm to the event. The success of the exhibition led to more community engagement. Mr. Silly Croutons began hosting art workshops where participants could create their own goat-themed art. These workshops were popular among local children and adults alike, and they provided a fun and creative outlet for expressing their artistic talents. Additionally, Mr. Silly Croutons collaborated with local schools to integrate art and agriculture into educational programs. He gave talks about his art, the role of goats in his creative process, and the importance of embracing unconventional ideas. Inspired by the success of his goat-themed art and the enjoyment of having Bella around, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to try his hand at making goat cheese. He took a cheese-making class and began experimenting with different recipes, producing small batches of artisanal goat cheese. The cheese became a new talking point in the community. While it still garnered mixed reactions, it was met with curiosity and appreciation by those willing to try it. Mr. Silly Croutons served his goat cheese at local events and gatherings, often with a side of his signature humor. As Mr. Silly Croutons continued to enjoy his artistic and culinary endeavors, he remained deeply connected to the community. His ability to turn unexpected situations into opportunities for creativity and engagement remained a hallmark of his personality. Bella continued to thrive, and her presence became a beloved part of Mr. Silly Croutons' life. The goat's quirky charm and the art inspired by her became an endearing aspect of his legacy, illustrating his unique approach to life and his ability to find joy in every experience. The story of Mr. Silly Croutons, his giant sandwich, his majestic horse, and his whimsical goat art became an integral part of local folklore. His adventures were celebrated for their creativity, humor, and the way they brought the community together. Through it all, Mr. Silly Croutons remained a vibrant and cherished figure in his town. His life was a testament to the power of embracing the unconventional and finding delight in the unexpected. And as he continued to explore new ideas and share his passions, the legacy of his adventures lived on, inspiring others to approach life with the same sense of wonder and joy. Miután Mr. Silly Croutons elveszti a Kekszker inspirálta művészeti projektjeit és az új sajtkészítési kalandot, úgy döntött, hogy egy újabb kihívásba vág bele, létrehozni egy különleges kertet, amely ötvözi művészetét és szeretetét a természet iránt. Mr. Silly Croutons egy nap úgy döntött, hogy eljött az ideje egy új projektnek. Inspirációként szolgált neki az a természetes szépség, amit a kertben látott, és elhatározta, hogy egyedi és varázslatos kertet hoz létre. A terv az volt, hogy a kert egyesíti a driftwood szobrokat, amelyek a korábbi művészeti projektekből ismertek, valamint különleges növényeket és virágokat. A kert megtervezéséhez Mr. Silly Croutons több napot töltött a helyszínen, hogy megtervezze a kert elrendezését. Úgy döntött, hogy a központi elem egy nagy driftwood szobor lesz, amely egy hatalmas fa formáját ölti. Ezen kívül különböző színpompás virágokat és egyedi növényeket ültetett, amelyek körülveszik a szobrot. A kert kialakítása során Mr. Silly Croutons saját keze munkáját is belítta, kézzel formázott driftwoodot használt, hogy egyedi bútordarabokat és dekorációkat készítsen. A kertben volt egy kis tó is, amelyet természetes anyagokból alakított ki, valamint egy hintaágy, ahol a látogatók pihenhettek. Amikor a kert elkészült, Mr. Silly Croutons úgy döntött, hogy megnyitja a közönség előtt. A megnyitó eseményt egy helyi fesztivál keretében tartotta, ahol az emberek megtekinthették a kert szépségeit és élvezhették a környezet adta lehetőségeket. A megnyitón Mr. Silly Croutons bemutatta a kert különleges elemeit, beleértve a driftwood szobrokat és a színpompás növényeket. Az eseményen volt zene, finom falatok és természetesen friss kecskesajt, amelyet Mr. Silly Croutons saját készítésű sajtként kínált. A közösség reakciója pozitív volt. A kert hamarosan népszerű látogatási helyszín lett, ahol az emberek kellemes időt tölthettek el a természet közelségében és élvezhették a kreatívan kialakított teret. Mr. Silly Croutons folyamatosan karbantartotta a kertet, és új növényeket ültetett, hogy mindig friss és vonzó maradjon. A kert különleges programokat is kínált, például tematikus művészeti workshopokat és kertészeti tanfolyamokat, amelyek segítettek az embereknek többet megtudni a növényekről és a kertépítésről. Mr. Silly Croutons új projektjei között szerepelt, hogy egyre több kreatív ötletet valósít meg a kertben, például tematikus virágágyásokat és interaktív művészeti installációkat hozott létre. Minden új elem hozzájárult a kert varázsához, és új élményekkel gazdagította a látogatókat. A kerttel való kalandjai során Mr. Silly Croutons továbbra is szórakoztató és inspiráló személyiség maradt a közösségben, aki mindig keresett új módokat arra, hogy örömet és kreativitást hozzon az emberek életébe. With the enchanting garden flourishing and the community fully engaged, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to enjoy his creative endeavors. However, as with all great adventures, new challenges and opportunities were just around the corner. One day, while attending a local horticultural fair, Mr. Silly Croutons came across an unusual and rare plant. The plant, called the luminous orchid, was known for its bioluminescent qualities that made it glow gently in the dark. Intrigued by its uniqueness, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to add this exotic plant to his garden. The luminous orchid required special care, and Mr. Silly Croutons set up a dedicated area in the garden with controlled lighting and a customized watering system to ensure its health. The plant quickly adapted to its new environment and became a captivating feature of the garden, especially during evening events when its glow added a magical atmosphere. Inspired by the luminous orchid's success, Mr. Silly Croutons launched a new community initiative aimed at promoting environmental awareness and appreciation for rare plants. He organized monthly garden glow nights, where people could visit the garden in the evening to see the luminous orchid and other glowing plants. These events were a hit, attracting visitors from nearby towns. Mr. Silly Croutons used these gatherings as opportunities to educate people about sustainable gardening practices and the importance of preserving rare and endangered plant species. The success of the Garden Glow Night sparked another idea in Mr. Silly Croutons' mind, transforming the garden into an immersive art installation. He began incorporating interactive art pieces and installations throughout the garden, including light sculptures, illuminated driftwood sculptures that created dynamic patterns of light and shadow, reflective pools, shallow ponds with mirrored surfaces that reflected the garden's beauty and created a serene atmosphere, soundscapes, hidden speakers playing calming nature sounds and ambient music that enhanced the garden's experience. The expanded garden installation quickly gained popularity, becoming a sought-after destination for art lovers and nature enthusiasts alike. To celebrate the garden's transformation, Mr. Silly Croutons organized a grand garden festival. The festival featured live music, art displays, food stalls, and interactive activities for visitors of all ages. Bella the goat made a special appearance, delighting children and adults with her charming antics. The festival was a massive success, bringing together the community and attracting visitors from far and wide. The event also helped raise funds for local environmental conservation projects, further cementing Mr. Silly Croutons' role as a beloved and impactful figure in his town. As Mr. Silly Croutons continued to develop and enrich his garden, he took time to reflect on his journey. From his artistic projects to his adventurous culinary experiments, each chapter of his life had been marked by creativity, curiosity, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. The garden, with its vibrant colors, glowing plants, and artistic installations, became a symbol of his journey, a place where imagination and nature converged. It also served as a reminder of the importance of pursuing one's passions and sharing joy with others. With his garden thriving and the community engaged, Mr. Silly Croutons was excited for the future. He had plans to explore new artistic projects, expand his garden's features, and continue to foster a sense of wonder and creativity in his town. His life remained a testament to the power of embracing new experiences and finding beauty in the unconventional. Mr. Silly Croutons was content knowing that his adventures had brought happiness and inspiration to those around him, and he looked forward to the many possibilities that lay ahead. As the luminous orchid continued to enchant visitors with its glowing beauty, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to take his garden's charm to new heights. He began integrating more rare and exotic plants into the garden, each with its own unique features. This expansion turned the garden into a mini-botanical haven, attracting even more visitors. One day, a renowned botanist from a prestigious university visited the garden. Impressed by Mr. Silly Croutons' innovative approach and the garden's impressive collection, the botanist suggested collaborating on a research project. The project would focus on the cultivation and preservation of rare plants, combining scientific research with the artistic aspects of the garden. Excited about this new opportunity, Mr. Silly Croutons agreed to the collaboration. They began developing a plan that included a dedicated research area within the garden and organized workshops for the community to learn about rare plant conservation and sustainable practices. The partnership with the botanist brought a new level of credibility to the garden and attracted scholars and environmentalists. The research area became a focal point for educational programs and public lectures, further enriching the garden's offerings. Meanwhile, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to host the Garden Glow Nights and other community events. He also started experimenting with new art installations, including interactive exhibits that allowed visitors to engage with the garden in novel ways. Despite the growing popularity and success of his projects, Mr. Silly Croutons remained grounded and dedicated to his initial passion, bringing joy and inspiration to his community. His ability to seamlessly blend art, nature, and education created a lasting impact. As he looked to the future, Mr. Silly Croutons envisioned expanding the garden even further, with plans for an international garden exchange program that would allow other communities to showcase their unique plants and artistic expressions. His journey was far from over, and he was eager to explore new possibilities and continue making a difference in his vibrant, ever-evolving garden. With the garden thriving and his projects flourishing, Mr. Silly Croutons realized that his old computer was no longer up to the task. He needed a new one to manage his expanding ventures, including the research collaboration, community events, and art installations. Deciding it was time for an upgrade, he set out to buy a new computer. On a bright, bustling afternoon, Mr. Silly Croutons ventured into the electronics store. The store was filled with various models and options, from sleek laptops to powerful desktop computers. As he walked through the aisles, he was immediately overwhelmed by the array of choices. He approached a friendly store assistant and explained his needs. The assistant started explaining the differences between the different types of computers, processors, storage options, and software packages. Mr. Silly Croutons tried to keep up, but the jargon quickly became confusing. After a lengthy explanation, Mr. Silly Croutons found himself more confused than ever. He was presented with choices like gaming laptops and high-performance desktops, each with different specifications. The terms RAM, SSD, and GPU felt like a foreign language. He wandered through the store, examining different models, but each seemed to have more features than he needed. Mr. Silly Croutons scratched his head and muttered, "I just need something to help with my garden projects and maybe to create some digital art. Why does it have to be so complicated?" Eventually, Mr. Silly Croutons made a decision. He chose a computer that he thought would be suitable, based on a combination of price and features he vaguely understood. The store assistant helped him with the purchase, and he took the new computer home, feeling both relieved and uncertain. Back at his beachside home, Mr. Silly Croutons unpacked the computer and set it up. He followed the installation instructions, but soon found himself struggling with the initial setup and configuration. The computer seemed to have a multitude of options and settings that were overwhelming. Days turned into weeks, and Mr. Silly Croutons struggled to get the computer running smoothly. He found himself battling with software installations, updates, and a seemingly endless list of troubleshooting steps. Despite his best efforts, he felt increasingly frustrated and defeated. Mr. Silly Croutons found himself in a state of confusion as he tried to navigate the world of modern computers. Despite his enthusiasm for new technologies, the vast array of choices and technical jargon proved overwhelming. After much deliberation and help from the store assistant, he purchased what he hoped was a suitable computer for managing his projects and creative work. Back at his beachside home, he eagerly unpacked the new computer, only to be met with a multitude of setup screens and options. The initial excitement soon turned to frustration as he struggled with the various settings, software installations, and updates. The user interface seemed to be a maze of menus and buttons, each promising different features but leaving him more confused than before. Undeterred, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to call in some friends and neighbors for assistance. They were happy to help and quickly identified some of the issues he faced. With their guidance, he managed to get the computer up and running, though he still grappled with a few remaining features. As he adjusted to his new machine, Mr. Silly Croutons discovered that the computer had more capabilities than he initially realized. He began exploring its features and found that, once he got past the initial learning curve, it could greatly benefit his projects. From digital art creation to managing his garden's research data, the computer eventually became a valuable tool. Despite the rocky start, Mr. Silly Croutons embraced the challenge and continued to adapt. His initial frustration gave way to a sense of accomplishment as he became more proficient with the computer. He learned to appreciate its potential and was grateful for the support he received from his community. As he looked back on the experience, Mr. Silly Croutons reflected on how even the most daunting tasks could lead to unexpected rewards. His ability to navigate through confusion and find solutions was yet another testament to his resilience and creativity. After getting accustomed to his new computer, Mr. Silly Croutons began using it for various aspects of his creative and community endeavors. The computer became an integral tool for managing his garden projects, designing digital art, and organizing events. He even started experimenting with new software to enhance his artistic creations and streamline his workflow. One day, while exploring new programs, Mr. Silly Croutons stumbled upon a virtual reality (VR) application that allowed users to create and explore virtual gardens. Intrigued by the idea, he decided to dive into this new technology. He purchased a VR headset and began experimenting with creating a virtual version of his garden. The VR project quickly became a passion. He meticulously recreated every corner of his real garden, from the luminous orchid to the interactive art installations. The virtual garden allowed users to experience his creative space in a completely new way, offering a unique blend of art and technology. Excited by the possibilities, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to host a virtual garden tour. He invited the community to experience his garden through VR, providing a novel way for people to explore and appreciate his work. The event was a hit, attracting a diverse audience eager to see the garden from a new perspective. The success of the virtual garden tour led to further innovations. Mr. Silly Croutons began collaborating with tech experts to develop interactive features, such as virtual art workshops and guided tours. The virtual garden became a platform for educational programs, allowing people from around the world to engage with his projects and learn about sustainable gardening and art. In addition to his VR endeavors, Mr. Silly Croutons continued to expand his physical garden. He introduced new plant species, created additional art installations, and organized more community events. The garden remained a vibrant hub of creativity and engagement, reflecting his ongoing commitment to bringing joy and inspiration to others. As he balanced his work between the virtual and physical worlds, Mr. Silly Croutons embraced the ever-evolving landscape of technology and creativity. His journey demonstrated the power of innovation and adaptability, and he looked forward to exploring even more possibilities in the future. With the virtual garden thriving and his physical garden continuing to captivate visitors, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to expand his horizons even further. He began to explore how technology could enhance not just his own projects but also those of others in his community. One day, Mr. Silly Croutons received an invitation to speak at a technology and art conference. The event aimed to explore the intersection of digital innovation and creative expression. Excited by the opportunity, he prepared a presentation on how he had integrated virtual reality with garden art, highlighting the success of his virtual garden and its impact on community engagement. At the conference, Mr. Silly Croutons' presentation was met with enthusiasm. Attendees were fascinated by his creative approach and the potential applications of VR in artistic and educational contexts. The positive feedback encouraged him to consider new ways to share his knowledge and experience with a broader audience. Inspired by the conference, Mr. Silly Croutons launched a new initiative, a series of workshops and online courses designed to teach others how to use technology in creative projects. These workshops covered topics such as VR design, digital art techniques, and integrating technology with traditional art forms. He partnered with local schools and art institutions to make these resources accessible to a wide audience. As the workshops gained popularity, Mr. Silly Croutons began receiving invitations to collaborate on various projects. He worked with artists, educators, and tech enthusiasts to develop innovative art installations, educational programs, and community events. His efforts helped bridge the gap between technology and traditional arts, fostering a culture of creativity and collaboration. The success of the workshops and collaborations led to the creation of a new community space dedicated to art and technology. Mr. Silly Croutons helped design this space, which featured interactive exhibits, digital art installations, and VR experiences. The space became a hub for creative experimentation and learning, attracting visitors and participants from across the region. As he continued to explore new projects and opportunities, Mr. Silly Croutons remained committed to his core values of creativity, community, and innovation. His journey from garden art to virtual reality had evolved into a larger mission to inspire and support others in their artistic and technological pursuits. Looking ahead, Mr. Silly Croutons envisioned even more possibilities. He considered expanding his initiatives internationally, exploring new technologies, and continuing to push the boundaries of creative expression. His dedication to blending art with technology continued to shape his path, promising exciting new chapters in his ongoing adventure. As Mr. Silly Croutons approached his 95th birthday, he found himself at the peak of a dynamic and fulfilling phase in his life. With his innovative projects thriving and his influence growing, he decided it was time to take his creative ventures to the next level. In celebration of his 95th year, Mr. Silly Croutons organized a grand event to showcase the culmination of his work. The event was a festival that merged art, technology, and community spirit, held at his newly established community space. The festival featured an impressive array of interactive art installations, live performances, and technology demonstrations, drawing participants from around the world. Inspired by the success of his community space and the festival, Mr. Silly Croutons set his sights on international collaborations. He began reaching out to artists, technologists, and educators from different countries to exchange ideas and work on joint projects. His goal was to create a global network of creative minds who could collaborate on innovative art and technology initiatives. Mr. Silly Croutons successfully launched the Global Art and Tech Network, a platform that connected artists and technologists across the globe. The network facilitated cross-cultural collaborations, virtual art exhibitions, and technology-driven art projects. It quickly gained traction, fostering a vibrant community of creators who were eager to explore new possibilities and share their work with a wider audience. As he continued to explore new avenues, Mr. Silly Croutons became involved in several exciting projects. 1. Interactive digital gardens. He developed new interactive digital gardens that could be explored through augmented reality (AR) apps. These gardens allowed users to create and modify virtual plant arrangements and art installations, blending digital and physical experiences. 2. Art and tech workshops worldwide. He expanded his workshops and online courses to an international audience, teaching people how to integrate technology with art. These programs received enthusiastic participation from diverse communities, contributing to a global exchange of ideas and skills. 3. Community art residences. Mr. Silly Croutons initiated a series of artist residences at his community space, inviting artists from various backgrounds to create new works and engage with the local community. The residences promoted collaboration and provided artists with resources and support for their projects. As he looked back on his journey, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His initial experiments with art and technology had evolved into a global movement that brought together creative minds from around the world. He continued to be inspired by the potential of blending art with technology and was excited about the future possibilities. At 95, Mr. Silly Croutons remained passionate and energetic, with a clear vision for the future. He planned to further develop his international network, explore emerging technologies, and continue inspiring others through his innovative projects. His journey had come full circle, from local garden art to global collaborations, and he was eager to see where his creativity and curiosity would lead him next. At 95, Mr. Silly Croutons had seen and experienced a great deal. His vibrant garden, international projects, and innovative ventures had kept him busy and engaged. Yet, even with all his creative pursuits, he still enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. One such pleasure was a visit to McDonald's, which he found both nostalgic and surprisingly enjoyable. One sunny afternoon, Mr. Silly Croutons decided to treat himself to a meal at his local McDonald's. He had always been curious about the appeal of fast food, and after years of focusing on complex projects, he wanted to experience something straightforward and familiar. He arrived at the McDonald's with a cheerful demeanor, despite his age. The employees, accustomed to a steady flow of customers, greeted him warmly. Mr. Silly Croutons took a moment to scan the menu, his eyes wide with curiosity. Standing at the counter, Mr. Silly Croutons was faced with a myriad of choices: Big Macs, Quarter Pounders, chicken nuggets, and various other items. He wasn't sure what to choose and found himself overwhelmed by the options. He tried to recall which items he had heard about or which seemed the most appealing. After some deliberation, he decided to go with a classic Big Mac and fries, along with a large Coke. He placed his order with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, and the cashier confirmed his choices with a friendly smile. With his meal in hand, Mr. Silly Croutons found a seat by the window and unwrapped his Big Mac. As he took his first bite, he was pleasantly surprised by the taste. The familiar flavors and textures of the burger and fries brought back a sense of simplicity and comfort. While eating, Mr. Silly Croutons took the opportunity to observe the bustling environment of the fast food restaurant. The place was filled with families, young people, and the occasional group of friends chatting and enjoying their meals. He found himself enjoying the lively atmosphere and the sense of community that came with it. As he finished his meal, Mr. Silly Croutons noticed a young couple sitting nearby who seemed intrigued by his presence. The couple approached him and struck up a conversation. They were impressed by his stories of creativity and innovation and were curious about his experiences. Mr. Silly Croutons shared some of his tales, from his garden projects to his recent ventures in virtual reality. The couple listened attentively, fascinated by his life's journey. They even took a photo with him, which they later posted on social media with a caption about meeting a local legend. Leaving McDonald's, Mr. Silly Croutons felt a renewed sense of joy. The simple pleasure of enjoying a classic fast food meal, coupled with the unexpected encounter with the young couple, reminded him that joy and inspiration could be found in the most unexpected places. As he returned to his creative projects, Mr. Silly Croutons carried with him a sense of contentment. His visit to McDonald's had been a delightful break from his usual routine, and he looked forward to more simple pleasures and new experiences in the days ahead. His zest for life and curiosity remained as strong as ever, proving that even at 95, the spirit of adventure never truly fades. At 95, Mr. Silly Croutons was still living a life full of creativity, community, and discovery. His garden and technological ventures had brought him immense joy and a sense of accomplishment. But as with all great adventures, a climactic and memorable conclusion awaited him. Mr. Silly Croutons decided to host one last grand event to celebrate the culmination of his life's work. He called it the Creative Convergence Festival, a massive celebration that would bring together artists, technologists, and community members from around the globe. The festival would showcase everything from virtual reality art to live performances and interactive installations, culminating in a spectacular finale. Months of preparation went into the festival. The event was to be held in the community space that Mr. Silly Croutons had helped develop, now transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. The anticipation was palpable as the day of the festival approached. On the day of the festival, the community space was bustling with excitement. Attendees marveled at the array of exhibits and installations, ranging from stunning digital art displays to immersive VR experiences. The festival also featured performances by musicians and dancers, creating a lively and festive atmosphere. As the festival reached its peak, Mr. Silly Croutons took to the stage to address the crowd. He was filled with pride and joy as he reflected on his journey and the incredible accomplishments of the event. His speech was heartfelt, and the audience listened with rapt attention. As Mr. Silly Croutons concluded his speech, he stepped off the stage to join the festivities. Unbeknownst to him, a banana peel had been left on the floor as part of a comedic skit that had just concluded. In a dramatic and unexpected twist, Mr. Silly Croutons slipped on the banana peel and went tumbling to the ground. The crowd gasped and then erupted into laughter. Despite the fall, Mr. Silly Croutons' indomitable spirit shone through. He quickly picked himself up, dusted off his clothes, and grinned widely. His good-natured reaction and infectious laughter turned the slip into a memorable and light-hearted moment of the festival. The festival continued with renewed energy, and Mr. Silly Croutons' slip on the banana peel became an endearing highlight of the event. As the sun set and the final performances drew to a close, the festivalgoers gathered for a grand fireworks display. Mr. Silly Croutons stood amidst the crowd, watching the fireworks light up the night sky. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment and gratitude. The festival had been a tremendous success, and it had allowed him to celebrate his passions and the community he had nurtured over the years. As the festival ended, Mr. Silly Croutons took a moment to reflect on his journey. He had spent a lifetime blending art with technology, fostering creativity, and bringing joy to others. The Creative Convergence Festival was the perfect culmination of his life's work, a vibrant, celebratory testament to his boundless creativity and dedication. In the days following the festival, Mr. Silly Croutons retired to a quiet beachside cottage, content and at peace. He spent his remaining days enjoying the simple pleasures of life, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the warmth of cherished memories. His legacy lived on through the garden, the community space, and the global network of creative minds he had inspired. Mr. Silly Croutons' story, marked by his inventive spirit, unwavering curiosity, and joyful embrace of life's surprises, was a reminder that even in the final chapters, there is always room for adventure, laughter, and a touch of unexpected magic. The following afternoon, Mr. Silly Croutom fell into a septic tank and drowned. Nobody attended his funeral as they thought he was faking his death again. His cottage was bulldozed to make room for an industrial estate, and everyone eventually forgot he existed. The end.